It's been a minute since that amazing race in Monza, but I want to talk about the top 4 teams, some of the drama, James Vowles' comments about Mick Schumacher and how he backtracked it, and finally, about Kevin Magnussen's ban. So I think McLaren is going to fumble it. I think there was a sentiment that if Red Bull was going to win this championship, their best asset is going to be McLaren themselves. So why is McLaren the biggest asset for Red Bull? I think there's a few things, right? So over the course of the first half of the season, they've made fair few fumbles along the way, whether it may be strategy, whether it may be the driver not being mature enough to make the right decisions, etc., etc. But they seem to have gotten to a place that the car is so dominant that the things that they need to do are now almost very basic, but they don't seem to be doing it. And what are these basic things? I think it's important, if Lando was to ever have a chance this year to win the championship, to enforce team orders, multi-21, number one driver, who the team's backing for the championship, whatever you call it. Monza was a clear example of where they should have done some things differently, right? So firstly, I think because they say Papaya Rules, which is basically race with respect, don't touch each other, blah, 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 right? So these definitions, and if you don't set context and you consistently say that both drivers are number one drivers, especially quoting Zak Brown, you're going to create the mentality between the drivers to always go for the move that otherwise they would reconsider. Piastri's move into the third corner in Monza was sublime, beautiful, right? Well judged. But if you listen to Lando's post-race conference, he explicitly says, if I braked a meter late, I would have crashed. So there's two sides to it, right? Piastri is backed by the team to say you can race your teammate. Piastri also takes the advantage of the fact that Norris might be conservative in his braking. He capitalizes on it, takes the lead. What if the conversation was a bit different? If in turn 1, you guys, the formation is 1-2, you continue that, go into the distance, win the race. They would have ultimately had a point swing of over 15 points for Lando. That would have been massive in terms of the championship, right? Which gives the breathing room for Lando to actually spread his opportunities to win, or even settle to a second on a race where he might not be optimal. So I think ultimately, because McLaren is indecisive, they're going to lose the Drivers' Championship. There's a lot of rumors that, I think Andrea Stella mentioned this to the race on one of the interviews. We are going to go back, review them, and if we need to, we're going to make these decisions. I think it's a few too many races too late. Yes, mathematically, there is the opportunity for Lando to still win, but that said, it can always be that you come to Abu Dhabi and then, oh, you're 3 points short, and you go back to Monza and you'd question, hey, why did you just not swap? And ultimately, really, if they did swap, do we really think that Piastri is ever going to care? He's done with his win. He's relatively a consistent podium contender. Is he really going to care who's second and third? I personally don't think so. So I think McLaren is ultimately butchering the chances to get both championships ultimately. And one other thing I wanted to mention was that I think Zak Brown or the McLaren leadership ultimately said that has been the way McLaren operated, and compared the current situation to the era of Ayrton and Prost. Excuse me, let's calm down. Yes, Piastri and Lando are really good drivers, but they are nowhere close to the charisma, the character, the talent, and they have not yet proven that they are that material. So let's not get carried away, right? And also, Ayrton and Alan came together many a times, right? So I don't think drawing parallels to a unrealistic past, plus the fact that issues had happened before and then they're just going to continue to let them happen now, is the solution. Well, long story short, I think McLaren had fumbled because their strategy, and they didn't necessarily know how to operate as a championship contender. But now they seem to have the car that overshadows everything, but they seem to be not doing the very basic things, such as, support the driver who has the optimal amount of chances. But because these chances may never come around again. Come 2025, there's no guarantee that McLaren is going to go forward with the same amount of dominance into that year. Look at Red Bull. I mean, that's a really nice segue to talk about Red Bull. Clearly lost something, right? So it's not the car they had in 2022, 2023, and also halfway till China in 2024. Some things happened. The upgrades either have introduced extreme amount of downforce, which has completely unsettled every correlation piece of technology that they have, and they have no idea how to go around in terms of setup. Max mentioned that it was undrivable. Everything, all his inputs are not accepted. It's a monster, and so forth and so forth, right? So clearly they've fallen off the pace. And then Perez mentioned, Max is experiencing the same issues that I used to experience before. So there's, I think he's just jumping on the wagon to say that, Max had like one bad race, because this has always been the case for me with my car, and because Max got some different treatment. So like, we got to take it with a grain of salt. But the problem is that they don't seem to have a immediate fix that would solve and close up the gap that they saw to McLaren over the course of the last couple of weekends, right? 22 seconds. Then I think this race, there was 50 odd seconds with tire maintenance and an extra pit stop to Leclerc. So there's a massive gap. And when things like this happen, naturally, they're going to question other teams' dominance, right? So I think there is now a request from Red Bull about how legal the wings of McLaren and Mercedes are. So the analysis point of view is to understand whether McLaren and Mercedes are running a illegal flexi wing. What we mean by a flexi wing is that because the front wing channels completely the airflow to the overall car, it's a pretty significant piece of aerodynamic value. Therefore, when it flexes around, especially in corners and straights, you can manipulate the airflow to create further downforce, especially around corners, right? So the amount of flex is limited in terms of the regulations, but the test is a stationary test that FIA conducts. So the geniuses at these specific teams will obviously find a way to add additional load so that it flexes even more when under 200 kilometers per hour, right? So it's absolutely understandable. So they've requested a analysis or assessment of those flexi wings or front wings from the FIA. But these things only come out when you're the non-dominant teams, right? At the start of the year, no one complained about McLaren, and now everyone is. So I think, funny enough, Red Bull will end up losing the constructors, but I think they might end up holding on to the Drivers' Championship. But I do doubt if at some point Sergio has to sacrifice in a world where Sergio happened to be in front of Max, maybe because of a safety car intervention or something or the other, right? Would Sergio actually give up the position? Remembering Brazil 2023? Yeah, 2023 or 2022, right? Where he was a mile away in terms of his championship, and then he wanted to secure second place for Perez, and then Max was like, nope, I've given you my reasons. I'm not going to do this, right? So it'll be interesting to see that level of drama from Red Bull. But wrapping up thoughts about Red Bull, I think they've fallen off the curve. Marco and and Christian Horner don't seem to have a clear direction in terms of what they need to do. Adrian Newey isn't going to come back and help them, and I think maybe it's coincidental. If they continue this level of performance, which means that they settle into the third or the fourth best team, man, that'll be challenging. But talking about third and fourth best team, that was Ferrari a few races ago, right? Like since Monaco, the highs of Monaco, right? Let's not get carried away. Maybe after Monza, what Ferrari does is they start the season, okay, we're not a championship contender. Let's make a race car to win Monaco because Leclerc, and then let's make a race to win Monza. Maybe next year they'll do 3 race win cars, i.e. Monaco, Silverstone, and Monza, because Lewis is there. Anyway, we detour. But I think ultimately what I'm trying to get at is Ferrari was the third or the fourth fastest car. But as of the last 2 races, I think Ferrari is solidifying the fact that they're more or less the second fastest car. And seems like the upgrade had worked, especially in a Monza type circuit. So they're only, wait a second, how far are they? They're only 39 points away, right? So that means it's a 3-car championship fight at this point. I think Mercedes is too far away with about 154 points away, but it's a 3-car championship and Red Bull might end up third. So I think Ferrari's got the right momentum going for them. They seem to have found the right balance and they're progressing. The last few races show that Charles is also operating his kind of optimum window, consistent podiums, then the win, and the Ferrari slowly but steadily coming together. And then ultimately, they seem to have a direction there, which means that it's really good. I mean, selfishly, I'm looking forward to that trajectory continuing into next year because majority of these cars would potentially be the bare basic groundwork for next year, and then maybe the development would be very, very limited because majority of the resources would be focused on the 2026 regulations, which are completely different. And then last but not least, Mercedes. They struggled the last 2 years. Correlation, the consistency of the car, how peaky the car is, i.e. like finding this window of balance. They seem to have turned a corner, but that found pace that they saw in Canada, Silverstone and Spa seem to have slowly but steadily kind of trickled a bit downwards, right? So I think they're a bit in the searching zone again, but that's maybe where they are at this point in time. And that's probably a function of like how late they were to understanding the concept of creating a ground effect car in this 2022 regulations, right? So a bit to come from Mercedes maybe, because they've said that they want to bring in upgrades every single race and so forth. So maybe things will turn around, and if ultimately these 3 teams become the top 3 teams and they consistently take away points from Red Bull, what should McLaren do? Back their number 1 driver. Let's go. It's time that Max gets a challenge, right? Like, don't get me wrong, Max is a deserved champion. He's driven flawlessly this year. I'm not debating the fact, but as fans, we also crave that. Like, how good was 2021, right? Despite the ending and the controversy behind it, like every race we would come in and tune in to see, like, oh my god, who's it gonna be? Is it Lewis or Max? Like, we want that. It unfortunately might not be Lewis or Max or Lando, but there's 4 teams or 3 teams that may potentially fight for a win, and ultimately that would mean that McLaren needs to prioritize with all of this passion. I just dried my mouth out. But McLaren needs to prioritize a driver so that they maximize the points with such a competitive field. So finishing thoughts, moving on to James Vowles. You guys know I love James Vowles, right? I think there's a mishap. I think he was unnecessarily harsh with his criticism towards Mick Schumacher and the likes of Logan Sargent, right? And there was a mention that Mick's mother had gone and made a public comment and made her feelings very, very clear in terms of how disrespectful those comments were. He walked his line back, but I think the truth of the matter is that's the truth. Let's be honest, like, Mick isn't special. At least I haven't seen that for 2 seasons, right? And neither is Logan, despite Alex saying that he knows the space, he knows that he has pace and he'll go and do great things, but that doesn't mean that he's a great F1 driver, right? Like, that's not evident. There are special talents, the likes of Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, a Seb, Lewis Hamilton, a Max Verstappen, right? Those are Michael Schumacher, but those are generational talents, and that level of talent is not evident. And last but not least, K Mag. I mentioned this in my mid season reviews. I think that the ban is warranted because he's been driving like a harassment on the racetrack, right? But was the last race the straw that broke the camel's back? Absolutely not. That was a clumsy change, right? But the way the stewards are set up and the rules are set up, it's just black and white. There's no clear area of judgment. Yes, I think there are certain situations like weights, white lines, track limits and so forth that need to be black and white. But then there are moments that there is literally two people that require to tangle, right? Where Kevin's gone and driven like an absolute nutter to ensure that the team secures points and then being very unsafe and so forth. Yes, those could be even 3-4 points, but last race wasn't something that should have put him towards a race ban. The race ban is warranted, I think. The last time was Roman Grosjean, I think, right? It's funny that they happen to be Haas drivers. Maybe there's a trend there. No, I like AO. Yeah, anyway, Lando needs to be a bit more aggressive and show a little bit of more max in him. McLaren needs to just put their foot down and say, do you know what? It's Lando. It's this year. It's Lando. Everyone's going to fall in line. Let's go. I don't care whether there's a driver number 1 clause because Mark Webber had a bad time with Sebastian Vettel. It's going to be Lando. We're going to support him. We're going to win. That's it, guys. If you guys like this video, smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'll see you on the next one. Peace. Ciao.